Poke the Bear is brought to you by Prizepicks.
And welcome into Poke the Bear episode 311, presented by Prizepicks. Go use that promo code CLNS to get $50 back when you play just $5. I'm Evan Marinofsky. That is Conor Ryan. Connor, what is up?
Evan, I'm doing well. How you doing?
Doing great. Doing great. We are recording this early on Wednesday morning, 9 a.m. That's early for us. Early for us. We have not done an early morning podcast in quite a while. Coffee going, all that. Still riding a high off Tuesday night's win. Oh my God. Bruins come back in the third, down 2-0, win 3-2. But easily the most gratifying moment of that game, maybe of the season, was Nikita Zadorov just freaking pounding Sam Bennett. And it's funny because, it wasn't the same fight, but remember when Chara, rearranged David Kochi? And obviously it wasn't the same thing, and Chara beat the bag out of Kochi. I mean, that was, mean. I mean, that was, a crime. This was a couple punches to Bennett's head, but that is as gratifying a beatdown as I've seen in a long time. I mean, Bennett's grabbing for Pasternak, trying to use him as a human shield. I think that might have just been him going down and trying to grab onto anything. But, oh, man. And the whole game, they showed fight, especially in that third. Andrew Peak was getting involved. They hate the Panthers. They hate the Panthers.
No.
Can you believe it? Can you believe it? The team that took their captain, the team that basically dismantled them over the last 2 years. But maybe as good a win as they've had this year, given the circumstances.
Yeah, no, that game was a blast, right? And I think a lot of what we'll talk about today is should the Bruins keep on winning? And we'll get to that. But that's a game that more than makes up for that, or dispels that narrative, even if it's just for a game, because that game was electric. Crowd was into it. Felt like a playoff game. Great response.
Tickets,
by
the way,
Bruins.
tickets were also cheaper, right? So you probably had diehard fans there as well, I would imagine.
Yeah, it was an awesome crowd. Felt like a playoff game. And all the credit to the Bruins for bouncing back. And to end it like that, it was maybe a fitting stamp or a good sign for a Bruins team that you look at the roster is what it is at this point, right? You've got a lot of new faces, got a lot of guys who have spent a lot of time in the AHL. It's a roster where you look at and you're like, you know what? I don't think this team's going to be lacking in terms of effort or urgency. It's a lot of guys that are either trying to carve out roles or fight for a job. But the roster is what it is, right? Do you have the horses? And, it's just one game, or if you want to make it 2 games with a Tampa, but they're not rolling over. They're fighting back. And I think that ending to that game was what Bruins wanted to see, right? That's a classic Sam Bennett move. And listen, I know there's guys who are good at their craft at being agitators and pests, but something about him just drives you nuts, right? It had a couple of those kind of not maybe the rabbit punch that took out Marchand, but he loves doing that move where it looks like he's trying to shove them against the boards, but it kind of looks like a cross check, but you see there's a punch underneath it.
Yes.
And goes right into your fucking ribs, and really, I'm sure it really fucking hurts. And then again, cross checks him, and then again, what usually the Panthers do, which I think broke the Bruins' brains the last couple of years, is they would stir up shit and then put the hands down, waiting for the Bruins to do something dumb and then go take advantage of it. But with 3 seconds left in the game, Zadorov's like, I'm not going to give you that option. And just wailed on him, which is, again, I think he can look at this year for Zadorov, and it's clearly, I think, had its ups and downs, but that's a guy who kind of met the moment there in terms of what the Bruins needed, right? And I think the one thing you can say about Zadorov is that I think he's pretty cognizant, and he said after the game, it wasn't like those punches were all about this guy has pissed my teammates off for 2 years now. This team took our old captain, but I think he knows when to meet the moment in those regards and when to fire up the crowd. And so for him to, beat down Bennett, take him down, and then cheer on, get the crowd going that was already fired up, was shit talking Bennett the entire way down the tunnel too.
Yes.
Again, what is it going to mean in the grand scheme of things? To be determined, but that was a good sign for a Bruins team that showing that, the roster is what it is. They've made seemingly their moves to signal that they're waving the white flag, but they're making things interesting. And they're showing that even if like this season ain't it and, it's to be determined, they're not rolling over. They're going to fight. And it makes for like, and it's not even just like the comeback. Like even like the first two periods, I get it was kind of frustrating. They weren't generating looks. They had like kind of those almost back-to-back power play bids as well. But like team looks different. Like I don't know if it's just because you've added more pace and skill to this team, but you got guys moving their feet. They're winning puck battles. They're moving the puck. They're generating looks. It looks like kind of a new team. Not saying that this team is getting ready to go on a run, but like I think you're seeing that it's what you want to see out of a team that has kind of torn down a lot of their roster, where you've got a lot of new blood, a lot of hungry players, and led to a pretty fun night of hockey, which honestly, wins or losses, haven't had a whole lot of those this year. So I will take it, Evan.
Yeah, I think for Bruins fans too, I mean, it's been a really hard past couple of days, week, the deadline. I think that obviously hurt a lot of people. And to then have that kind of performance on home ice, I think it just made people feel better. I think it gave them sort of reassurance that, things would be okay. Now, Zadorov's actually been pretty good of late. Like, Zadorov's been playing well. He works well with Yoki Haru, at least in the two games they played together.
Dude, that pairing's been, like, legit
nails.
Good. Like, Yoki Haru, I'm like, Yoki Haru's kind of like, he's like Finnish Grizzlick, like when Grizzlick was, like, locked in, where it's like he kind of just makes smart, simple plays. Puck, like, hits the tape, gets out of the way. And, like, it's not like he's flashy, but then you look at his numbers and he's like, all right, like, he's playing 20 minutes a night, and that pairing now, I think they've pplayed. Sorry, I just kind of took over your sentiment there,
care.
But played 30 minutes together, Zadorov and Yuki Haru, and they've got like a 17-7 edge in shots on goal, and it's 1-0 goal scored. But pairing looks good. You got something there. It's all about right now building things. And if you look at, I know Yuki Haru is a free agent, but you can look at that pairing of like, we bring him back, that's a pair. We can leave them guys alone, maybe. So encouraging.
Well, again, I mean, I think you look to next year, right? Like if you want to look ahead, so you have Andrew Peak, you have Yoki Haru, you have McAvoy. Could you live with that on your right side? And then on your left side, you have Lindholm, Lohrei, and Zadorov. Like maybe you could. And we'll get into that. That's an off-season thing. We don't need to waste a lot of time on that. But, Zadorov, I give him a lot of credit. Like I think the leadership's been there. I think he completely met the moment with that fight. I think he's met the moment the last couple games. And I also think they are pissed off. Like, I think that team is pissed off. And obviously, I think they don't want, they didn't want those guys dealt. They wanted to keep pushing. But I think they also realized it's sort of on them. It's on everybody. I mean, like, it's Don Sweeney didn't just wake up one morning and trade everybody just for the sake of trading them. We talked about that for months. I mean, they looked terrible. They looked awful, as you said multiple times. They played like dickheads many, many times. So, I think they realized
they're kind of playing like dickheads now, but like the endearing way.
In the best way possible.
There's multiple ways you can play as dickheads.
Yes.
So.
And to what you mentioned about pace and speed and skill, that has definitely been there. And I think you can also attribute that to, it's like right before a dog dies, it has a lot of energy. Maybe that's what this is. But we don't know that. They've 2 games and they've looked great. I think Jakub Lauko is like the glue. He's like the guy for this team.
Maybe he's just the key to all this.
He's the key cog. Grapes in the locker room does a lot. But I do think that there is a case to be made, and it's nothing against Coyle and Carlo and Frederick and Marchand and Brazeau, but you have guys. I don't want to say you trimmed fat because they were contributors, but something we talked about a lot last week was the Bruins hold on to middle tier guys for a long time, and maybe they're not supposed to. Maybe guys like Coyle and Carlo and Frederick are supposed to be moved around, and you're not supposed to be in a place for 10, 15 years. You're there for 4 or 5 and move on to the next. And Carlo and Coyle, and I'm not saying that this is on them. It's not on them. I don't mean that because that's not true. But you've replaced, you've moved on. You've got younger guys. You've got faster guys. I mean, you essentially replaced Coyle with Middlestat, who has 2 assists in 2 games, but a good setup guy. Like, you've gotten something out of him. You essentially replaced Carlo with Yoki Haru, which again, I think Carlo on paper is better, but Yoki Haru's been terrific. And I'm not saying this is the new Bruins. Like, this is the team that, they're gonna run it back next year with the same group. But what I'm saying is, you move guys around, you move guys out, and I'm not saying you need to have turnover every single year, but it's like the Celtics with Marcus Smart, where it's like it just isn't working anymore. And I think that was the case with Frederick and Carlo and Coyle, and getting pieces for them and getting assets for them. Marchand's a different case. Obviously, Marchand's not a middle tier guy, but I do think that you're right. They're younger, they're faster. You have a lot of guys with stuff to prove. Vinny Lettieri, Cole Koepke, I think is going to be a UFA at the end of this year, correct?
Yeah, Hushmadinov, I think, is actually like you're seeing. And
I was
it's
going to say,
kind
he's
of
looked
funny,
great. Hushmadinov's looked awesome.
It's funny that people look at like the players the Bruins have in their system, which maybe just the Bruins aren't going to call up these guys. Maybe we should just give it for what it is. But it's like Hushmadinov. Hushmadinov's a guy that like was in like really weird deployment with Minnesota. And now, like, again, the line itself is like, you look at it on paper. And I don't saw the video of Sacco looking at his lineup card before the game. And he was like, but it was like, yeah, Hushmadinov, Elias Lindholm, and Jakub Lauko. You're like, oh, okay. Yeah. But, like, you know what? You're putting those guys in spots. And, like, I think next year you can envision, like, Lauko being a fourth-line guy. And maybe Hushmadinov is as well. But right now, when you kind of have nothing left to lose, look at a guy like Hushmadinov who's got skill, he's got a really high motor. It's like, all right, maybe he is still better suited to be like a fourth line guy, and I think he could have a good role there if he's moving his legs like he's done the last couple of games. He's got a spot on this team, but also like for right now,
he plays like that. That's the thing.
Yeah,
like, from everything I've read, that's him.
Yeah, but like there's a guy who's like putting up 40 points as a 20-year-old in the KHL against dudes 30 years old. So it's like, all right, right now if we've got nothing
Russian
to lose,
dudes.
Yeah, like. If you got or Tony D'Angelo,
that's right.
But like,
Tony D. I think you and I could put up freaking 30 points playing against Tony D.
But so right now, when you've got nothing left to lose, put him up with. I know I'm saying like Lindholm has been this playmaking ace, but like put him in a top 6 role and see what he can do. And I think you're seeing a guy that has more to give. That all right, even if you end this year, regardless of how it ends, you can now look at these players you've added, and it gives you. It feels like you're building something, right? You've already got the draft capital, and we'll talk about their own pick and all that implication, but they got a lot of draft picks, and now you can go into next year with a lot of cap space with all that capital, and also you can look at guys like Hushmadinov and be like, that guy has something to give. Maybe he's more of a third-line guy if he starts producing at the end of this year. You know what Lauko brings and provides you. You know what Yokiharu brings and provides you if you think he can carry this over, because like there's a lot of value in terms of, as you said, if you don't have to go out and sign a David Savad, right, who's probably going to get overpaid, or like a Neil Pionk, who I think is a good player, but is probably going to make a lot of money.
Yeah, those guys get overpaid on July 1.
And again, maybe we'll look back at that, and like we could go into November later on this year and be like, remember when Connor was like, oh, Peak and Yokiharu is going to be just fine. And, things can go south, but you look at what Yokiharu does, and it's something that you can build off of. You look at Casey Middlestat, and I think you look at the way he plays, and like you can see, like gets out muscled a little bit. He's not a perfect player, but in the right spot. Like if you give him power play reps with Pasternak as a setup guy, or even like as the year goes on, maybe you put him with Pasternak. Like, not saying you can make him a points merchant, but he could be a 60-point guy if you just put him in those spots.
Easily,
the
yes,
playmaking is there. So I think regardless of how this year ends, a game like this is one you look to, and feels like I think why also Bruins fans are excited. That it's still, I think a lot of people are still in shock, still a little hurt from all that's gone on the last couple of days. But that was a game that even if it doesn't end with a playoff run this year, feels like you're building something. You're getting to know these new players, the established talent, and that's a win you look back on maybe, a year from now and be like, that's when it started building up, right? Because like look at where they are right now. And I think it is encouraging to see a lot of players pulling the rope, because that was an entertaining and impressive performance from a team that you look on there, you look at the depth chart and you're like, all right, we getting Misa, we getting McQueen, they're playing well. And also Jeremy Swayman, last 2 games, he's been pretty good.
Yeah.
And that goes a long way.
Yeah. You mentioned like wins we look back on. Obviously, I think this Florida one will be, but I remember after Claude got fired, they won. They beat Montreal at home like 4-0, and the Garden was nuts. And that was sort of the win that started that next part of that Bruins core that I remember. And that I think that was 2017. And then obviously the win that started the entire run that they just kind of ended was that 08 Game 6 Sturm-face win. That was sort of like that. And now is a 3-2 win in March over the Panthers. Is that like, the next start of the new era? Maybe not, but this is the new era. So you're starting this next era pretty good. Like if the last era was since 08 and now, 2025 onward is a different one, it's a nice way to start it. Not saying this is not going to be, I don't think, the team that's going to be there when they're in the cup 4 or 5 years from now, but I think it's a healthy thing. I have some bigger takeaways from this team, what this team could be over the next couple months, and whether or not they should be winning, which sounds like an insane thing to say. But first, our friends over at Prizepicks. Prizepicks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prizepicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long over at Prizepicks. Prizepicks invented the flex play, Connor, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Prizepicks puts their members first. All withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. And they offer MasterCard. So it's easy, quick deposits into my account. Bruins-wise, Pasternak's still rolling. Middlestat has 2 points in 2 games. Swayman's making a lot of saves. So I think I said this on Bruins Beat, if you get Swayman saves prop, I think you take more on that for sure. So download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prizepicks, run your game. So I mentioned Marcus Smart earlier, and I guess I'm going to stay on the Celtics train. Do you remember when they got Isaiah Thomas at that trade deadline? Mm-hmm. Electric. That team was electric, and they squeaked in as the 8th seed, and then the next couple of years, they were in the playoffs every year. I think they were a 1 seed one year, and then they ended up trading him, and they got Kyrie and whatever. But it kickstarted sort of that next generation. That Celtics team was fun. They didn't win anything, but they were damn fun to watch every single game. You rooted for them. You wanted them to win. They called it the Bridgie Celtics. That was sort of like that group. I wonder if we're seeing the same thing. The Bridgie Bruins. The team that's sort of in the middle. Like they're not winning a cup, but they're going to be an exciting team to watch every night because you got guys, as I said, who have to prove themselves. Yogi Haru, Vinny Lettieri, Cole Koepke. These guys who play with a high motor, who play with pace, maybe not the best guys, but they're going to forecheck their asses off. They're going to, pressure guys down low. They're going to cycle. They're going to get a lot of shots. They're going to do whatever it takes to get to the interior. I do wonder, and it's 2 games in, so like take it with a grain of salt, but I do wonder if this team kind of takes on that identity over the next 18 or so games.
Yeah, I think you look at just the new faces and what they have. It definitely is a team that is entertaining, right? And it does look night and day in terms of just the speed and skill. Shocking. The team that couldn't score and had to work so hard for their offense because they were really slow, didn't have enough skill, is now making things happen. You've got other guys stepping up, and even like established guys on the roster, right? Like you get Zaka gets his first goal since February 1st, I want to say. Like, and I thought he had a good game. Pasternak is what he is right now, which is just he's a monster. Like he's just carrying this team. This guy, completely. If they make the playoffs, he's just been a force. And even like look at Mason Lohrei, and again, you look at just where it feels like this team is building something, right? Even if like doesn't lead to much this spring. You can look at like games like this with a guy like Lohrei, right? And he's had his ups and downs, just like Zadorov's had his ups and downs. But like you're seeing the process, you're seeing the growth. And I think for a guy like Lohrei, a guy that's been looking really confident in that spot, even like that power play, the first power play they had where they didn't score, they still had like 6 or 7 like scoring chances against Bobrovsky. They were moving the puck well, making simple plays, crowding the net front. Like again, they're not reinventing the wheel. They're skating hard, they're winning puck battles, and they're putting pucks on net, and they're trying to kind of just create chaos. And when you're a team that maybe doesn't have the star talent, it makes for a simplified, entertaining game. And I think that's what you said, Evan. Like, what are the expectations? There really aren't any right now, which is almost kind of like it's weird because the Bruins for the last decade plus have entered every year as a team that at the very least is going to be in the mix, if not considered a contender. And now it's almost like it's different, but also it's like almost liberating right now, where it's like, all right, next year the Bruins have some moves to do this offseason, but you have to imagine they're going to try to retrofit and get back into the mix of things. So maybe the sentiment changes, but for these 16, 17 games, it's like, you know what? They got nothing to lose. Let's just sit back and enjoy it. Like, oh shit, they're winning. This is great. Like, oh, if they're losing, oh, they're getting a draft pick and guys are still getting experience. Like, you kind of, if you're a Bruins fan, I know there's probably Bruins fans who are still very upset about the deadline. And, I get that. But it does feel like right now, if you're just looking at the overall health of the franchise and its future moving forward, you're kind of operating with house money. Like, everyone's getting experience. They're not rolling over in these games. Like, it'd be one thing if, like, even if you're investing in like the draft pick and that is the top priority, still, if they come out and like with this lineup, they get pumped by the Lightning and then they get smoked by Florida at home, you're still like, all right, like, yep, let's get ready for Roger McQueen. But holy
we signed
shit,
up for this.
These next couple weeks are gonna be long. And it's like, again, we'll talk now about whether it's the right call to keep on fighting through these games, but makes for an entertaining product on the ice. And right now, considering when the Bruins were winning this year, still always wasn't pretty. It was like, all right, how much more can David Pastrnak do to carry this team moving forward? It did feel like, that game, especially last night, was a breath of fresh air.
Completely. And then you hit on it. You get to the point of, and I think every Bruins fan, they're sort of like Larry David at the Palestinian chicken place, where it's like, you're like, like, should they be winning these games? They are, by the way, right now, 2 points out of that final wild card spot in the East. They are
playing Ottawa on Thursday, which all of a sudden, that was the game I was looking at. I was like, yeah, all right, like maybe I'll catch up on some other stuff to do. I'll work on some features. I'm like, that game is now the game of the year.
Yeah. And then you play Tampa right after. So they're in the mix, Connor. That's the thing. They are in the mix. I think there are people who are pissed that they're winning. And I think when the deadline happened last week, we all looked at each other and we're like, all right, the next couple weeks are going to be unwatchable. They absolutely need to sort of tank for the pick. But I think this is something people forget. You can't intentionally lose. Like, at the end of the day, these are professional athletes who are paid a lot of money, who have a lot of pride. And it sounds like I'm defending them and everything like that, but that's the truth. You can't tell these guys, go out and lose. And yeah, sure, you could, I guess, call everybody up, Merkulov, Lysell, put them in top roles and all that. And I think there is merit to that. I think there's legitimate, you get value out of that because you'd see what you have. And I think this is the time to see what you have. But if they keep playing the way they are, like, again, a guy like Mason Lowry, ideally you want him as a top 4 defenseman of the future. You don't want him losing a ton of games and getting into a mindset of that loser mindset of playing losing hockey. You want the winning hockey. Now, you also want the higher pick. And this is the year. Like, this is the year to get the highest possible pick. But there is a part of me, though, Connor. People talked about this with the Patriots. Like, if they fell out of number 1, maybe the football gods will reward them with a great player at 2, 3, or 4. And it's like, if the Bruins try and they end up with the 12th pick instead of the 7th pick, like, that is a big difference. And that's hard to defend. But maybe they run into someone at 12. But that's not a reliable way to do it. So I don't know. Like, is it worth it to are these wins worth it? Like, I don't believe this team's going deep. I think they'd be if they keep playing like this, it's a fun way to end the year. But I do also want the higher pick. But that's a loser mentality. I'm like sitting on the fence about this. Like, it's you go back and forth on it.
Yeah, like, I'm not going to begrudge you either way, honestly, of what your opinion is, because I can see, like, looking at the way this team's playing, it's like, you know what, like, maybe they get in the playoffs and they build something. They're not going to win, but you build something. Well, if Michael Misa has 31 goals next year as an 18-year-old, I'm like, shit. Like, but you also run the risk, as you said, like, you don't want to intentionally tank games or just mail it in when, like, if you are also a team that is trying to get back at it next year, yes, you made the case the best way to do that is, pocket a guy like a Misa or a Haggs, or more realistically, a McQueen, Denoye, someone like that. Maybe if they don't help you next year, you made the most of what was a shit year. You got a legit center prospect to help you out. Now, if you're intentionally tanking games you also don't want to let that culture kind of rot into your, this is a team that's also in transition, right? Like it's still, you got Pasternak there, but you got a whole lot of new faces. You got McAvoy's not playing. You don't want to have that mentality set in of like I guess this is it. Like, all right, we'll just keep on looking ahead because that's what the Buffalo Sabres are like. We'll
Yes.
just keep on
And
looking
that
ahead. Like, what
sticks.
can you do?
That
You
sticks.
look at the Red Wings, that team that always feels like they're on the brink. Felt like a month ago they're ready to make a push, and what they've lost now, 6 in a row. I guess we'll look ahead to next year. You don't want that setting in as well, right? So it's one like you can make a very compelling case on both sides of it, right? And I won't begrudge you for either being like in the comments being like, you idiots, like they need to get the top pick, like make the most of it. I get it. And I also can say like, hey, this is fun and maybe they're building towards something. Like I mentioned last week on Poke the Bear with Ty of like setting expectations for like what next year should be. And like we were talking about the retool, rebuild, and like what the timeline is. My opinion was like a successful year is like you make do whatever this year is. I probably thought at that point they were going to lose most of these games down the stretch.
I completely did. I said last week it's going to be unwatchable, and I was wrong.
But I was like, you know what? Like next year, it's like, yeah, you make a few moves in the offseason, and then like maybe you're kind of like where you were in that Ottawa year. Like you're building something, it's ups and downs, you make the playoffs, and you have a good first round exit, and you show something, and then you build off into 26, 27, right? I'm like, that seems fair, right? But like, what if you jump ahead a year by doing that? What if like you mesh things now? And again, I know where the playoff odds are. Like they need to legitimately go on a run. So like if they get shit pumped by Ottawa on Thursday, that probably is maybe that's the dose of cold water. And then on like Friday, I'll be like, yeah, they should keep on losing, right? And I'm sure that like that will honestly probably be the reaction. Like I'm maybe just riding off the high of Tuesday's game, but like if you do go on a run though, and you make something of it with this team, and like you have no expectations going to the playoffs, but it's all about just getting there and building something moving forward. Maybe you've accelerated your retool by, a whole year if that's the case. So I'm also not going to begrudge them if they can do that. They've got an uphill climb. That's stating the obvious, but I do think that is something where, however you want to view it, there's pros and cons to each side, right? And so it makes a really fascinating argument because I do think if you're looking at the overall health of this team, like you can also give guys like Lorai, Hushmadinov, Yokiharu experience in this system, while also like getting a Misa or a Hagens or a guy that 2 years from now is in the NHL, and you're like, all right, this is a building block moving forward. But tell you what, in a shitty year, it is a good problem to have because like they're playing great, they're making something happen, they're changing the narrative ever so slightly as to what this year is, and it's a lot of fun. And if the bottom falls out and they regress and come back to earth, well, there's still probably going to be a fun product. Like even if like that game right with Panthers, they come up short in that comeback, you still probably leave that game like if you're trying to be the optimist, being like, that was a pretty entertaining game. Fought back, just don't have the horses against a team like Florida. Makes sense. I mean, you still get a pick. So even if the effort is still there and the loss and the wins don't pile up in conjunction, you can also view that as a positive. It means you're bumping up the draft order, but you're seeing guys that are stepping up and looking like they want to be part of what that next wave of talent is with this team. So it's maybe my opinion will change on Thursday. If they win on Thursday in Ottawa against the Ottawa team that's won 5 in a row, I'm like, all right, I guess
Gear up for the playoffs, baby.
Carl, break out the whiteboard, baby.
Come back, baby. Come back. Because I already told Carl, I was like, it stinks. We're probably not going to have any. We're not going to have any post game shows this year. But it's like, all right, nope. Get your stuff. Get ready. Yep. We're going on. It also comes down to you have Swayman in net, who obviously has struggled this year, who's had a bad year, really got off on the wrong foot. But if we said it all along, if he gets hot, I'm not saying they're winning the cup, but it's not out of their own possibility they get in the playoffs and they're in. And suddenly it's like, holy crap. Like, they're in this thing. And I don't think they're far away from that either. Like they have the 10th overall pick right now, I think, but they're 2 points out of the freaking last wildcard spot. So it's not out of their own possibility. No, nobody does. Nobody wants it. I will also say, like, if you're going to give me games like Tuesday night and you're going to give effort like that and go to the playoffs, go win the damn thing. Like, keep winning. I don't care. Like, be entertaining. I'm all for it. And if you end up with the 12th overall pick or the 13th overall pick or whatever, it's, you start to get into it. But if you're going to go on that kind of run and end on a high note and build something for next year, all right, you have a ton of cap space. You have picks in future years. You have 2 second rounders this year. Like, we've said it all along, second round picks are for getting guys that you can project as NHL regulars down the road. Maybe they're not your number one center or your number one D, but they're guys that can help you down the road. You have 2 of those picks this year. So I'm after Tuesday night, I'm riding off the high of it. Now I'm like you.
Yes.
If they lose in Ottawa, and they lose to Tampa, and it's like, all right, well, lose, get the pick. But you're right. It's good either way. I'm fine with either. And I know people say, pick a side. You should want them to lose or you should want them to win. Whatever happens, happens, man.
Have you seen what this last week has been like? My brain is already fried. I'm on like 3 hours of sleep the last 6 days. Like, let's just enjoy the moment, everyone.
I was at UConn for the prep championships, which is an all day thing. Games start at like 11 or 12, and then they go. I was there till like 9 or 10 at night, and it's great. And someone in the middle of the day, I'm fully locked in on prep. I'm not thinking about Bruins or anything. Someone, a kid next to me is like, "So what do you think of the Bruins moves?" And I was like, "Buddy, do you have 3 hours? Like, I can't do this. I can't watch this and go deep on Marchand. We can't do that." And we didn't even touch Marchand's presser in this episode, but we can touch on that later in the week. Connor, what can the people look forward to from you over at the Globe and Boston.com?
Yeah, you can follow me over the Globe and Boston.com. We have covered every step of the way this Bruins season for these final, 15 games of the regular season, plus what is going to be a very eventful, busy offseason as well. So you can read all my stuff over there. If you want to follow me on Twitter, X, whatever it's called, you can at Conor Ryan _93.
Go do all that. I said 18 games, but apparently it's less. But I was actually counting for all the playoff games after.
Oh, there you go.
We got Bruins in the playoffs. Anyways, that has been Poke the Bear. That's Conor Ryan. I'm Evan Marinofsky. You Poke the Bear listeners. Have a great rest of your week.